This week I want to return to primary sources, empirical studies from peer-reviewed journals. These articles are how psychologists communicate and advance the science of psychology. Just a little review before we begin. What is empirical research? Remember that empirical research articles are articles that report research, and the author of the article is the same person who conducted the research. When you're reading empirical articles, it is important to look for peer-reviewed journals. Why? Well, consider the process for getting an article published in a peer-reviewed journal. When a researcher has written up their work, they will then submit their manuscript to a journal. The editor of the journal will then send that manuscript to 2 or more experts for review. The experts don't know who has submitted the manuscript, and they will critique it and then make one of 3 recommendations. Publish the manuscript as is, return the manuscript to the researcher for revisions, or reject the manuscript. When the editor receives these critiques, he or she will then make the final decision: publish, revise, or reject. What this means for you as the reader is that before you can even get to read the article, at least 3 experts have critiqued it, which is why you can consider it to be credible. Remember, you need to specify peer-reviewed when you're searching for an article through a database. Now let's begin to consider empirical research articles written in APA style. APA style does more than just tell us how to cite references. When an APA journal article is written in APA style, it will also contain the following components. The article begins with an abstract. An abstract is simply a short summary of the research paper. The abstract can be invaluable in determining whether a particular article is germane to your research. But be careful, you can't summarize research by reading the abstract alone. Next comes the introduction. An introduction in an empirical article plays several roles. Of course, you will find the research question or problem is introduced, but this is also where you will find the literature review. The literature review is a compilation of appropriate research that addresses the current research question. This provides the background for formulating the hypothesis of the current study. The introduction will also explain why the researcher is interested in studying this problem or question, and usually will end with the hypothesis for the research. It should be noted that sometimes you will find a research article that includes more than one experiment. The individual hypotheses for each experiment, as well as the rationale, will be included here in the introduction. The next section of an empirical article is the method. In the methods section, you will find information about the participants, the population and sample being studied, as well as specifics about the demographics of the sample. This is important since the sample and population tell you information about generalizations you can make from this research. The materials is next in the methods section. Here you will discover any special materials that are used to carry out the experiment. This may include special equipment and materials used to collect the data, questionnaires, surveys, and instruments. Finally, in the methods section, the researcher will provide the procedure used in the experiment. This is a very detailed sequence of exactly what was done in the study. At this point, the information you have read would allow you to closely replicate the study. But there's more that is presented as part of the article. The results section of the article provides the reader with specific data analysis. As you are learning about statistical analysis, you should be able to make some evaluations about the appropriateness of the statistics utilized. At minimum, though, and most importantly, you need to determine if the hypothesis is supported or not supported. Remember that we don't prove a hypothesis. No matter how strong the evidence that supports it, this is just still one study, and it's important to replicate this study and build your evidence for supporting the hypothesis. The final section of the paper is the discussion. You've already read the results, but it is here in the discussion section of the paper that the author moves beyond the statistical meaning of the results and presents you with the conclusions that they have reached based on that data. The discussion may also include information that relates back to the previous studies that were reported in the introduction. Are the conclusions from this study consistent with or different from those previous studies? It is also in the discussion section that the researcher will point out any limitations to the study. These are important to note. The researcher will end the discussion with suggestions for future new studies. Perhaps the results of this study have provoked new questions, and the researcher may suggest that these new questions be explored. I've not mentioned the references. We will study these a bit closer in an upcoming lesson, but I do want to mention that as you begin to gather your research on a particular topic, you will want to seriously review the references. If a study you're interested in, including in your literature, is mentioned in one article, it's important that you go to that primary source and read that paper before you consider including it in your research. This week, I am asking you to go back to the article you read in week 1 and to review that article while thinking about the information available in each of the components I have identified. I have given you a research report search sheet to complete as you go through this process.